Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy little human being. You, welcome to my channel and welcome to today's Morbid makeup video. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this craziness today, you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or BRATTERSTEIN, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the murder of 16-year-old Skylar Neese. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new Morbid makeup video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both BRATTERSTEIN, but no pressure. So guess what, guys? Today's video, it's sponsored by Dossier. You remember Dossier? For some reason, they still want to work with me, which is amazing, and I am so thankful. So for those of you who do not know, I'm going to tell you what Dossier is right now. Dossier is a perfume company that creates luxury scents at a fraction of luxury prices. Where a typical luxury bottle of perfume can cost anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars, Dossier's perfumes are only between $29 and $49, and they offer you bulk deals where if you buy 3 or more bottles, you get free shipping plus 25% off. And that is a very good deal for those of us who are trying to smell good on a budget without sacrificing quality. So I got 2 new scents here, and honestly, even through the box, they smell so good already. Oh my gosh. The first one I got is Floral Rose, which is inspired by the scent of Le Labo Rose 31. And the Le Labo one is $196, whereas the Dossier is only $39, and it smells super good. I've never tried the Labo because I don't have $196 to spare, but it smells really good, and all the reviews say that it smells pretty dang similar. In addition to the Floral Rose, I also got Ambre Saffron, which is inspired by the famous Baccarat Rouge 540 perfume, and that perfume costs around $200, and I'm just like, I don't know who these perfume companies think we are. And another thing that's very exciting for me personally when it comes to Dossier is that Dossier perfumes are all cruelty-free, and that is a big deal to me as a cruelty-free YouTuber. If you do not know, everything that I buy and use is cruelty-free because that's very important to me, and they smell just so good. I feel like these would layer really well together. I've been finding recently that Dossier perfumes layer really well together, and I feel like these two both have enough of similar base notes, similarities, that they would smell really good layered together. Because when I'm doing this, I'm liking what's happening in my nostrils. Anyways, Dossier is offering members of the Brat Pack 10% off their purchase of their new favorite perfume with the code BRATTERSTEIN at checkout. So I would take advantage of that because it's already pretty inexpensive. You get those bulk deals and an additional 10% off. Hell yeah. So don't forget to click the link down below if you want to try your new favorite perfume and use the code BRATTERSTEIN at checkout to save some money, honey. And last, I just want to say a big thank you to Dossier for wanting to hang out with me. I think that's really cool, and it's very validating. And of course, I want to thank you guys for always being so cool when I do sponsors, because I put a lot of work into these videos, and it's really cool to see that they are acknowledged in such a way by a brand, and a brand that I actually really like, which makes it even more dope. So thank you to all of you, everyone. You're all so cool. Now, let's get into the story now. So today's video, the story of Skylar Neese, is actually a subscriber suggestion. A subscriber named Shannon suggested this video. Hi Shannon. Thank you, Shannon. I saw all your comments. Shannon was a very persistent lady. She watched so many of my videos, and in all of them she's like, can you please do Skylar Neese? And I was like, absolutely, yes I will. And honestly, sometimes that's all it takes is just a little persistence and just saying it over and over to me, and then I'll be like, okay, it's time. I'm gonna do it. That's the same thing that happened with Graham Young. Trev, over and over, it was like Graham Young, and that's just sometimes how it goes. And it just took me a little while to do it because this was already on my list because I am pretty familiar with the case. I had never done a deep dive, but I knew the basics, but it's a kid case, and you know, kid cases sort of bum me out, and this one is it's super horrible. Skylar Neese was a 16-year-old girl who went missing from her home in West Virginia, and she just vanished, and for months her parents had to wonder what had happened to their only child. And once they learned what had actually happened to her, it became much worse than they could have ever imagined when the police got a unexpected confession from one of Skylar's Bestfriends. Okay? It's a really horrible case, and I'm just gonna give you a heads up now that it's a rough one. With that said, I'm gonna be telling you the whole story today, and while I do, I'm gonna be putting on a face of makeup. Now, if that's not your thing, that's fine, I get it. Thank you for hanging out this long. I hope you find somebody whose channel is more your style. But if you're kind of on the fence, like that sounds weird, maybe stick around. You might be surprised by how much you'll like me. Okay? Okay. So come, gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of 16-year-old Skylar Neese. On July 5th, 2012, in Star City, West Virginia, 16-year-old Skylar Neese came home from a late-night shift at the fast food restaurant Wendy's. She came into the house, she told her mother and her father goodnight, gave them both kisses, and told them she loved them before going into her room and closing the door to presumably go to sleep for the night. The following afternoon, her father came home from work to find that Skylar was nowhere to be found. She was supposed to be home. She had a shift at work that day and she was going to be borrowing the car, but she was just missing. Upon inspection, her father found that her bedroom window was cracked, her screen was missing, later found in her closet, and a bench had been pushed under her window. It looked like Skylar had snuck out of her room the night before and just never returned. From that day on, 16-year-old Skylar was missing. For months, her family had no idea what happened to her. That was until March of 2013 when her body was found in the woods and identified as being Skylar's. And this discovery and identification came after the police received an unexpected confession from one of Skylar's own best friends, a girl named Rachel Schuff. And what's crazy here and what we're going to get into is it turns out that Rachel wasn't the only one responsible for what happened to Skylar. Now, who was Skylar Neese? Skylar Annette Neese was born February 10th, 1996, making her an Aquarius. She was the only child born to parents Dave and Mary Neese, and she was the couple's pride and joy. You often hear people say that you shouldn't just have one child because the kid will grow up to be spoiled. And that may have been the case a little bit with Skylar, but in a good way. She was just very, very loved. She was a total daddy's girl, and you can tell, especially with her father, that her loss was the most devastating blow. She was their one and their only, and she was just a good kid. She didn't get into trouble, and she had good grades, and had a close group of friends. She was smart and sweet and feisty and bubbly. She was an honor student despite having a good social life, and she was super responsible. At 16 years old, she had already made the responsible decision to get a part-time job at the fast food chain Wendy's. And a side note, when I was reading articles about Skylar, I found that after Skylar died, her parents actually tried to return her work shirt and her hat to Wendy's, and they told her parents to keep them because of how much Skylar loved her job. And that was like a little note that just like got to my heart, because it's one of those things that just, like, you know these are real people, but that kind of hit me in a very real way. She was just like a good kid with ambitions and hopes and dreams, and she had the plan to grow up and be a criminal defense attorney. In 2012, when Skylar was murdered, she had just finished off her sophomore year at University High School. Skylar seemed happy at this school. Not only was she like well-liked and popular, which automatically makes high school a more enjoyable experience, but she was also lucky enough to be going to school with her very best friend, her best friend since childhood, and this was a girl named Sheila Eddy. And when I say, or it might have been Edie, it's E-D-D-Y. I know that I know how it's pronounced. I'm probably gonna look it up real quick. But either way, when I say childhood friend, I mean childhood friend. Sheila and Skylar met when they were in elementary school, and they had been lucky enough that their friendship had passed the test of time. And what I mean when I say that is that they met when they were only in second grade, and they immediately clicked. They were both only children, so they just globbed onto each other since they didn't have, siblings to be close to. And even though they didn't go to school together all throughout all of those years, they didn't go to school together until high school because they lived in separate areas, they were still crazy close despite not seeing each other every day. And sometimes it's the familiarity and the convenience that makes a friendship close, especially when you're young like that. But they were just independently close. Sheila was like that friend. They were always together. They always had sleepovers, and when they would go on family trips, they would bring each other, that type of friend, and they would just make silly videos together and have fun together. They were just a source of happiness and light in each other's lives. Skylar's father, Dave Neese, says of the two's close friendship, and I quote, "Sheila didn't even knock on the door when she came over. She just came on in." Which I think we've all had a friend like that. I mean, I know that I have. But that special bond and that closeness and that love that they had for each other unfortunately had an expiration date, and that was in 2012. The breakdown between Skylar and Sheila seemed to happen when the duo introduced a third into their little clique. And this was when in high school the two girls met a girl named Rachel Schuff. Rachel was known as being a really good girl. She, like Sheila, was from a divorced household, but that didn't seem to affect her. Before going to this public high school, she had gone to a Catholic school, so she was very strong in her morals. She came from a well-off family. She was just known as being a good kid, the type of kid you would want your child to be friends with, somebody with a good moral compass. The girls bonded really quickly with Rachel. They really, really liked her, and soon thereafter, all of them started to refer to all of them as best friends. They were all three best friends with each other. And once the two met the third, once they became a trio, they all started to get a little more rebellious, a little more wild. The girls started, sneaking out, smoking weed, drinking, just getting into a little more normal high school stuff. I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of high schooler you were, but I was definitely the kind of high schooler that was doing this kind of stuff. And it's generally believed that Sheila was the ringleader of this. She was known as being the bad seed even. And a lot of Skylar's other friends, because Skylar was popular independent of her friendship with Sheila, but a lot of her other friends didn't want to hang out with her because they didn't like Sheila and they saw her as bad news. But this would just kind of push the three of them closer together because it was like them against the world. And she wasn't going to listen to people when they're saying that her best friend ain't shit, because nobody would do that. Because that's your girl, you know what I mean? The three were just super close. They were constantly together. The three musketeers, the three blind mice, if they weren't with each other physically, they were always talking to each other on Twitter, social media, texting. They were inseparable. But as is so common when you take two girls and you add a third to the group, the dynamic got really messed up. And I know I heard this in a podcast, and I know I also saw this in an article I read on this case, but it was pointed out that anytime you add a third girl in a group of two girls, anytime you have three, things go very, very wrong. And you know what's funny is prior to this case and looking into it and reading that, I hadn't really considered it, but from personal experience, I 100% agree with that statement. And that's especially, in my opinion, true in high school because of a couple reasons. One, teenage girls are shady as hell. They're so mean. They really are. And two, they're like bad judges of character. So what inevitably happens is out of the three, two of them end up getting closer, which causes resentment, which causes shadiness, which causes shit talking, and it makes the other person feel alienated and left out. And that's exactly what happened here. Sheila and Rachel ended up getting closer, and Skylar started to feel phased out. Sheila and Rachel would even coordinate dressing the same. There's photos of them where they were both wearing little striped shirts, and they wouldn't tell Skylar about it. And then when she would confront them on it, because she did feel left out, because she did feel alienated, they would be like, "Oh, you're crazy. This is just a big old coincidence." And they would just gaslight the hell out of her and make her feel crazy for thinking it, but she wasn't dumb. She could tell that's what was happening. What's interesting about this case, among many things, is that you can kind of see the breakdown in the friendship between the girls on Twitter, because when this was happening, social media was then and still is now a humongous thing, and the girls were all documenting all of their feelings and thoughts on Twitter all the time, 24/7. So you can actually see the breakdown and how it took place and how the girls were thinking and feeling. And most importantly, you see how Skylar is feeling, and it's very clear that can tell that there's a breakdown in the friendship, that she's trying to make it work, that the girls are making her feel crazy, and you can see that this is all happening at the time that Rachel was introduced into the friend group. Shortly before Skylar's murder, literally the day before her murder, she tweeted, and I quote, "It really doesn't take much to piss me off. Sick of being at fucking home. Thanks, friends. Love hanging out with you, too." And this came as a response to Rachel and Sheila making 4th of July plans and hanging out on a holiday, which is a day that you're supposed to hang out with all your friends. And they did this without inviting her. So the day of Skylar's abduction and murder was July 5th, 2012. And as I stated previously, Skylar had come home from her job at Wendy's, She told her parents goodnight. She gave them a hug and a kiss, told them she loved them, and she went off into the room, her parents having no idea that this would be the last time they would ever see her alive. The next morning, her parents woke up early to go to work, and Skylar's bedroom door was still closed, but they didn't really think much of it. She was a teenager. She was probably just sleeping in, and she was responsible. She always got herself up in the morning and got herself going, so they left for the work that day not thinking anything was wrong. They only thought something was wrong later in the afternoon when her father came home from work. He came home, I don't remember the exact time, but it was in the afternoon, and he found that Skylar's bedroom door was still closed. And that was unusual because she had work that day. He had come home with the understanding that he was going to be giving Skylar the family car so that she could go work a shift at Wendy's. So her dad went and checked her bedroom door, and it turned out that it was locked from the inside. And when he knocked and called out to her, there was no response. So I saw different reportings on what happened here. I'm not sure if he was able to break into the room through the door or if he went outside and looked through her window and was able to see these things. I think he went outside actually. And what he found was that a small bench had been pushed under Skylar's window and that her window screen had been removed, and it was later found in her closet. At this point, Mary had come home too, and her parents were trying not to panic. Skylar was 16 years old. It was the day after 4th of July. Maybe she was out doing something, and she had a shift at work that she wouldn't miss. So they were trying to keep themselves calm. Just not freaking out and trying not to overreact when there could be a perfectly good and logical explanation for where Skylar was. So after calling Skylar's phone over and over and getting no response, they're like, okay, let's call Sheila. If she's with anyone, she's with Sheila, and Sheila will know what's up. So they call Sheila, and that's when Sheila tells them that she has no idea where Skylar is, that she had talked to her the night before, but that she had not seen her. So they were already pretty freaked out in hearing this because it didn't make sense for them that Sheila wouldn't know where Skylar was. And if that wasn't bad enough, they then received a call from Wendy's wondering where Skylar was because she hadn't shown up for her shift. And that's when panic really set in and they called the police. So dispatch said that they'd send over an officer right away. And while they waited, they actually received a call from Sheila again. She called Skylar's parents and she was like, okay, I need to tell you guys the truth. And this is when she told them that she actually had seen Skylar the night before, not just talked to her. She said that at about 11 p.m., her and Rachel had picked Skylar up. They had went on a joyride. They had smoked a little weed. And that they had dropped her back off at home just before midnight. And not that they dropped her off at her door. Apparently, according to them, Skylar asked them to drop her off down the street so that the headlights would not wake up her parents because she didn't want to get in trouble for sneaking out of the house. And they said that's the last time, Sheila said that's the last time that she and Rachel had seen Skylar. After this, Sheila and her mother actually headed over to Skylar's family's house because they wanted to be there for them when the police get there. They wanted to help out with all the searches. They just wanted to help find Skylar. That's all anyone wanted to do was find Skylar. So police come over and they question Skylar's parents, try to find out everything that's going on, and they even start searching for her. And this is when Mary, Skylar's mother, remembers that her apartment complex just recently put up common area cameras that might have footage of Skylar coming and going. So they're like, okay, we need to get over there. They go over to the landlord and they're like, hey, this is what's going on. Skylar's missing. Can we please look at these cameras to see if she is on them? And the landlord was like, absolutely yes. Come on in. Let's look this over right now. So this is when the police officer, Skylar's parents, Sheila and Sheila's mother, along with the landlord, watched the tape. And what they saw was not what they wanted to see, I'm sure. And this was a video that was time-stamped at 12:30 a.m. that showed Skylar walking through the parking lot, a little purse thrown over her shoulder, and showed her climbing into an unknown vehicle and driving off. And this was at 12:30, which is supposedly 30 minutes after Sheila and Rachel dropped her off. And I can only imagine that her poor parents' hearts just dropped into their stomach when they saw their daughter climb into the car and just drive off into the night, knowing that she never came back. And at this point, the police weren't questioning Sheila at all, so they didn't even bother to rewind that tape to corroborate Sheila's story of picking Skylar up and dropping her off earlier in the night. They just took her word for it and didn't even check that, which later would come into play as being problem. What's messed up about this case, among the millions of things that are messed up about this case, is that the police refused to issue an Amber Alert for Skylar because technically she didn't meet all the qualifications, because one of the main ones is that you have to have proof that the child's been abducted. So Skylar, because she was seen getting into the vehicle willingly, was treated as a runaway. But she didn't take anything with her, right? And her parents and her friends were immediately like, absolutely not. The runaway theory did not appeal to them at all. They didn't entertain that at all. And Mary, Skylar's mother, said of this theory, and I quote, "Her contact lenses were still in her bedroom and her hair straightener. She hated her curly hair. She wouldn't leave home without that. Goody was there. Everything a girl would take was there. Toothbrush, hairbrush. She took her phone, but not her charger." And for reference, just so you know, Goody, because she said Goody was there, Goody was one of Mary, her mother Mary's, old silk nightgowns that Skylar used as a security blanket, which is like another, that moment for me. It wasn't only Skylar's family that was devastated at her loss, but also one of the most affected seemed to be Skylar's best friend, Sheila. And she was just really having a hard time with it. The two had been so close for so many years that her absence seemed to be too much for Sheila to bear. At one point, she was even over at Skylar's house with her family, and she lay in Skylar's bed. This was just shortly after Skylar went missing, and just cried and cried and cried. And she laid there with mother, and the two cried together. Sheila and Skylar's mother lay in Skylar's bed and just cry. And Mary, Skylar's mother, found herself even feeling more pain for Sheila than she felt for herself. She was like a daughter to them. She had been around most of Skylar's life. She was the friend that went on all the trips. She was in all the family photos. She was so close to them. And she was so young to be experiencing this loss, you know, and she just found herself hurting for her because she saw her as her kid as well. Sheila was family to Skylar's family. The family did everything they could independently to try to bring awareness to Skylar's disappearance. They printed out missing persons posters, and they went out and passed them out. And of course, Sheila was right there with them, helping them pass out these posters. The family also held a candlelight vigil, and Sheila and Rachel were both there, holding each other, crying, seemingly devastated. And the girls often post, well, not often, they occasionally posted on social media about how much they miss Skylar and how hard their existence was without her there. So I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but when Skylar went missing, it was July, so it was summer vacation from school. And now we're fast forwarding a little bit, and it's already September, and the kids are going back to school, but without Skylar, who would have been starting her sophomore year of high school. And once the kids were all back in school, rumors about what happened to Skylar seemed to spread quicker. More things came out, probably because all the kids are together and the ease of passing information was so easy. But there were many, many interesting theories, a lot of far out theories that involved like bank robberies and stuff that didn't pan out to be anything serious. But one theory that seemed to be the most probable and seemed to be the most widely believed was that Rachel and Sheila had something to do with Skylar's disappearance, or at least knew more than they were saying. Interestingly, though, this wasn't just, you know, some high school rumor that was getting passed around. This was something that the police themselves actually thought carried a little bit of weight, and they had actually started investigating the two girls. Police started to question people who knew the girls, see if they had been acting weird, see what the relationship was like between them and Skylar. And it got to the point that Skylar's family even came to the girls' defense and was like, you know, leave them alone. They're young girls. They're going through enough. They're missing their best friend. Which, I mean, later they definitely changed their tune, but I can't imagine how frustrating it is to know that, for them to know that they had defended these girls. But either way, police didn't care. They still pursued these girls, and they even brought them in for interviews. So during Sheila's first interview, police immediately thought that she seemed off. Something about the way that she talked, the way that she carried herself, didn't seem quite right to law enforcement. They noticed that she didn't seem to show a lot of emotion while discussing her missing best friend, even though if, you know, her story was true, she would have been the last one to see her and she would have just dropped her off, which I would imagine if you were a normal, innocent person would give you a lot of feelings and a lot of guilt knowing that you had dropped her off down the street. But Sheila did not seem to have this emotional response that they would expect. She seemed to them that she was very methodical, she was very in control of everything she was saying, and that she thought she was in control, that they could feel that from her. And she seemed to be more interested in what was going on with the investigation than her missing friend. She just seemed to want to know like where they were and what they were doing to catch the guilty person, and this just struck them as a bit odd. Officer Jessica Colbank said of Sheila's interview, and I quote, "Sheila's demeanor was so off. I thought if that were my best friend, I wouldn't be sitting at home, hanging out with friends, having a good old time. I'd be bawling my eyes out and searching for her. Sheila was devoid of emotion. Unless you asked her questions she didn't want to answer. Then she could turn on the tears." They also noted that Sheila's car did seem to resemble the grainy footage of the car that picked Skylar up the night that she disappeared. So the next day, police decided that they wanted to question Rachel, so they contact her, and this is when they discover that Rachel is actually away at church camp because reason, she's a very religious girl, she loves God, right? And when they talked to her, which was weird, is that she acted like she had no idea Skylar was even missing, which, I don't know, I feel like since the three were so close, Sheila might have, you know, contacted her to let her know if, you know, they were normal, but she acted like she had no idea Skylar was missing. Anyway, once she returned home from her church camp, she was interviewed by police. I guess she said she was going to meet up with them and then never showed up, so they had to like track her down, but either way, they got her in, they interviewed her, and her story was consistent with Sheila's, but it was consistent to the point that police found it suspicious because it sounded very, very rehearsed. In September, police got warrants to confiscate all of the girls, all of Sheila and Rachel's electronics, their phones, their computers, anything that they could have been using to stay in contact with one another so that they could review what had been said, all that jazz, you know, policing. So quickly police realize that they are on the right track in suspecting that there's something off with Sheila and Rachel because they find that Skylar, between 11 and midnight, had been texting her friends saying like, when are we gonna get together? What are we gonna do? And this is during the time that the girls say that Skylar was already with them. That's suspicious, ladies. And the second thing that made them go, huh, is that they finally sat down, looked into their brains, and they were like, wait a minute. We have footage of Skylar getting into the mystery vehicle at midnight and not coming back, but we don't have any footage of Skylar leaving with her friends at 11 or coming back home at midnight when they said they dropped her off. How they missed this, I'll never understand, but they did. But now they were like, oh shit, these girls are lying. They're lying. Why would they lie if they were innocent? They had nothing to hide. So now police are really suspecting them, and they're starting to think that, you know what, I bet you that car that Skylar got into at 12:30 was Sheila's car. So they start looking into surveillance footage from around the area, you know, local businesses, things like that, and they find that, yes, the car that Skylar was in was Sheila's car. And what was weird is that these girls had initially said they were in one certain area, and now police are finding that they're in a completely different area, an area that's 45 minutes away from where they said they were. So police are like, and they confront the girls on this. And when the girls were confronted with this, they were kind of like, oh, you know, silly me. I was stoned. It's just such a confusion. You know, marijuana, how it gets to your brain like that. And this wasn't like an easy thing that you would confuse. This was almost an hour away. So these girls were just lying. Police stay on the girls and they question them again. And this is when they completely change their story. They say at this point that they were in that other area, that they had been confused about where they had gone that night. They totally forgot. And while they were in that other area, Skylar had just randomly jumped out of their car and ran off into the woods, and they were never able to recover her. which is a completely different story than they had initially said. And I think this is them realizing that, like, shit's falling down around them. They're probably going to search that area now, and we need to get a story that would explain if she's found there, is what I'm thinking. Because I can't imagine why else they would just randomly change the story like that. Doesn't really make sense to me. So police want to polygraph the girls, and they both agree to do so. Takes one, and apparently she was very cocky. She seemed to think she was in control of everything, but she failed miserably. And I don't believe Rachel ever ended up taking a polygraph test. I read, and this is crazy, that she was on her way to take her polygraph test. I believe she was going to be taking it with her attorney, so she was on her way to her attorney's office. Her dad was driving down the road. And Rachel is like, nah, fuck this. And she jumps out of her father's moving vehicle and runs away. I guess she ran actually to Sheila's mother's work, I believe is what I read, which is weird. Some people think she was involved, or that she knew, not involved, but that she knew more than she was saying. And I guess one of the attorneys, Jessica, the girl who gave the statement about Sheila's mentality, ended up getting kicked off the case because she called Sheila's mother a tool for impeding the investigation. But that's a whole thing that I'm not even going to get into because they don't know that she knew. They just kind of suspect that she knew. But either way, Rachel ducked and rolled out of her father's car. Because that is a good way to handle confrontation. I get it. It's totally reasonable. So now we're fast forwarding to December. Skylar's been gone for months, and her family can't even bring themselves to put up a Christmas tree, which I get it. That time of year is already really hard for people in general, especially if you've lost a loved one, and to have your only child, like the source of happiness at Christmas, gone, and to have no idea where she is or if she's safe, if she's even alive. I can't imagine what kind of hell that is. It's unimaginable. I feel so bad for her parents. You know, shortly after Christmas, the first big break came in Skylar's case when first big break happened in Rachel. Okay, so that day, December 28th, Rachel's mother calls the police saying that her daughter is having a mental breakdown. She is running around the house. She's running around the street, screaming at the top of her lungs, talking about how she's going to kill herself. And her father is trying to get a handle of herself, trying to lock her in a room, trying to stop her from doing anything to herself. But this girl simply cannot be tamed. She simply cannot be tamed. So police arrive, and they realize quickly that this is beyond them because most police officers are not trained to be handling mentally unstable people. That's why we have professionals for that. So they refer her to a mental health facility. While in the mental hospital, she was there, Rachel, less than a week. Sheila tried to visit her, I believe, 2 times, and both times she was turned away. I believe this was on Rachel's parents' request. They were like, don't let that little girl in to see our child. We think she has something to do with this, I believe, which ended up being a pretty good thing. After being released from the hospital, Rachel seemed to be doing relatively well, and she's decided that she's going to go in and have a meeting with the police. So police are like, hell yeah, this is great. Her brain, you know, she's just gone through a break. Maybe she's ready to admit what they know. Because at this point, they're assuming, from what I read online, police are thinking that there was some sort of accident. Maybe drug-related, alcohol-related. Maybe Skylar OD'd. The girls freaked out. They didn't know what to do. So they hid her. So they're like, okay, maybe this is the break we've been waiting for. So she comes into police and blows their actual socks off when they ask, okay, what happened to Skylar? Rachel looks at them and says, we stabbed her. So police were like, wait a minute. Let's go back a little bit. Tell me everything that happened. And Rachel asks for a trash can in case she vomits and tells police the whole story. She then told police the entire thing. Not only that she and Sheila had murdered Skylar, but that they had been planning it. It was incredibly premeditated. They had been planning it for about a year. And they had been openly discussing it at school, in classes, in between classes. They were not being discreet at all. Apparently, some people even actually heard these girls discussing hiding a body, and some of them even heard they were discussing killing Skylar specifically, and no one just did anything. No one thought it was serious, because like, who would think that's serious? Who's gonna look at 2 16-year-old girls who are both like pretty popular, like normal, like a close group of friends, who's gonna look at them and believe that they're being serious about wanting to kill their friend? No one. But apparently, from what I saw online, someone did say something to Skylar, and according to the prelude section on SkylarNeeseMurder.com, which if you want to look into this case, that website has it's a wealth of resource. But they said that someone did mention it to Skylar, and Skylar even confronted the girls about it, and they just sort of gaslit her and were like, what, that's crazy, you know, that's crazy, that's no big deal. So the whole time they're planning to kill her, they're also still gaslighting her and staying friends with her and tormenting her by making her feel left out. It's just crazy. It's just so messed up. Anyways, Rachel tells police that during a spring break trip in early June of 2012, that's when a big breakdown happened in the friend group. Skylar and Sheila had gone away for that spring break together because remember, they're best friends, they're family friends. So for spring break, naturally they went together. And during that trip, they fought the entire time. And shortly after, Skylar was sending out cryptic texts, things like, just know, I know. And it was after this trip that Sheila came back and told Rachel, now's the time, Skylar needs to die. Rachel says that the day they decided that they were going to kill Skylar, they made like a kill kit and put it in the trunk of the car, that she brought a shovel from her father's house, and that Sheila had taken a bunch of knives from her house, and they took those along with a bunch of cleaning supplies and put them in the trunk of the car. That night, they called or texted Skylar to let her know that they wanted to hang out, that they wanted to go on a joyride, smoke some weed, have some fun. I'm sure that Skylar was just completely stoked, especially considering her friends had just ditched her on the 4th of July, so she was probably seeing this as some sort of olive branch, which is even more upsetting. And so she snuck out of her bedroom window and ran across the parking lot and jumped into the car with her best friends, expecting a night of fun, not knowing that there was a literal kill kit in the trunk of the car that included a shovel, bleach, a change of clothes for the girls. And it's just very upsetting. They then drove Skylar to a secluded area. Apparently they drove down some like long, windy road out in the middle of nowhere, which to me just immediately makes me so creeped out. But apparently this was a really good place because this was a place that Skylar was familiar with. This was a place that the girls would often go to hang out and smoke weed and not be detected. But it was also perfect because it was out in the middle of nowhere and nobody would hear them or know what was happening. The girls got to the area and they hung out for a little bit in the car before getting out to go find a perfect spot to smoke weed outside of the car. Once they got to that spot, they realized that nobody had grabbed a lighter. So Skylar was like, no problem, I'll go back to the car and I will get it. So she turned her back on them and started walking to the car. And this is when the girls realized it was their perfect opportunity. The two girls decided that they would go on 3, and after counting down 1, 2, 3, they ambushed Skylar from behind, stabbing her over and over. Skylar did try to run, but one, she was surprised, she was outnumbered, she had no idea this was happening, and Rachel, as she tried to run, ended up actually tackling her, and Rachel was a lot bigger of a person than Skylar was, so she was taken down to the ground easily, and even if she had not been tackled, it would have been hard for her to run anyway because apparently she had been stabbed in the leg, I believe it was near the knee, during the attack, so she wouldn't have been able to really run anyway. During the struggle at one point, Skylar was able to get one of the knives and she even cut Rachel on her leg. I believe it was above the foot, like on the shin, but it was no use. She was overpowered. There was 2 of them. There was one of her. She didn't know it was going to be happening, and they were able to keep the upper hand. Once the girls were satisfied with what they had done, they stood up and just stood over Skylar and literally stood there and watched her bleed to death. Her last words, it was just one word, was just asking them why. Rachel said during the attack that Skylar's neck kept making weird noises. So what they did is they stabbed her until those noises stopped. Skylar Neese succumbed to her approximately 50 stab wounds. Sheila and Rachel then went to a nearby creek because they were near a creek where this happened, and they washed themselves off in the creek, got rid of all the blood, changed their clothes, and then on their way home that evening, well, it was actually morning because they got home at about dawn, they disposed of the knives and the bloody clothes, and those were never recovered to this day. Hours before Skylar was murdered, she sent out her final tweet, and the tweet simply said, "All I do is hope." And then after this, her social media went totally dark, as I'm sure you can imagine, because she wasn't there to be updating it. The girls arrived at their homes at about dawn, like I said, and at about 9 a.m., Sheila sent out a tweet that said simply, "Always keep your cool." This is the same day that she murdered Skylar. So while Skylar's missing for all of these months, Sheila comes to Skylar's family's house, gets comforted by Skylar's parents, tries to garner sympathy from the people who actually loved and cared about Skylar. Just being a little shithead asshole, when all the while she had murdered her, stabbed her to death, and left her in the woods alone. She later even tweeted, this was like a bit later, like shortly before she was arrested, she tweeted, "We really did go on 3. I hate this girl. I hate both these girls." There's just something that seems a little extra evil about Sheila to me. And a lot of people feel that way, and I think it's because, like, she just really inserted herself so much to go and be able to look her family in the face like that all the time, knowing what you did. And from what I read online, Rachel didn't do this. Rachel never went and saw her family after Skylar went missing. Like, she wasn't like getting off on that the way I think Sheila was, and that's just how they're different. Neither is more guilty or less guilty, but something's wrong with Sheila. To be able to do that, to be able to look into the eyes of Skylar's parents, knowing what you did to their kid is just beyond my mind. I can't even, like, what a bitch. What a fucking bitch. When police asked Rachel, why did you kill Skylar? She simply said, "We just didn't like her anymore." It's rumored that them simply not liking Skylar is not the real motive for the murder because, okay, so apparently it's been said, it's been proven, it's been speculated, whatever, that in late summer of 2011, Skylar, Rachel, and Sheila were having a slumber party. And during the slumber party, they had been drinking, and Skylar witnessed Rachel and Sheila hooking up, apparently doing everything you could do besides having actual sex. And Skylar was in the room while all of this was happening and couldn't do anything about it. And apparently police found this, I believe, in Skylar's diary, a passage about this happening. And I guess that this ended in a pretty big fight between Sheila and Skylar. And after this fight, Skylar tweeted some cryptic stuff such as, "I tell the whole school what I have on everyone, which is a lot. Hashtag, if I can get away with it." We don't know if that was in reference to the girls hooking up, but the timing seems to correlate a little bit. But the girls have never named this as being a motive, just for clarity. So, Rachel agreed to take police to where she and Sheila had left Skylar's body. And she told police that initially they had planned to bury Skylar out in the woods. That's why they brought that shovel. But after they killed her, they realized that when they tried to dig the grave, that the ground was too hard. It was impossible for them to do so because it was near a creek and it was really, really rocky. So they instead grabbed Skylar by her arms, pulled her next to a tree, and then covered her with dirt, sticks, rocks, anything to try to conceal the body. So when they showed up at the place where Skylar's body was said to have been left, it was winter now, and they were finding it difficult to locate her body because as Rachel looked around, she realized that things looked very different now that it was covered with knee-deep snow. So police realized that they were going to have to wait a couple of weeks for the area to thaw a little bit before they could come back and search. Because when they did this initial search, it was January of 2013, and it had been 6 months. There was snow everywhere, and they just couldn't locate Skyler. At this point, they don't immediately arrest Rachel. They instead let her go home, and she's sort of working for police, I imagine, for her plea deal. And she is tasked with trying to get information on the record from Sheila admitting what she did. They even had her, after she got out of the hospital, wear a wire and have her, I think her whole room was set up with recording devices by the police. And they set up a meeting. Sheila came over and she was supposed to try to get Sheila to say something, but this ended up being unsuccessful. Around this time, police actually go back out to the area that Rachel showed them that they had left Skyler to try to do another search for her. And this is when they finally found her. It had been 6 months since she was left there, so her body was skeletonized. And I imagine the reason they left her out there was so that nature could do what it does and get rid of her body. And from what I remember reading online, her skull actually wasn't with the rest of her body. So if Rachel had never confessed, who knows where this could have gone. It could have very well been that her body would have been scattered. So it is good that Rachel did confess there, because I can't imagine her family never having answers. There's so many people who just have no idea what happened, and I think that's sometimes what happens. And anyway, when the body was found, it wasn't immediately released to the media that Skyler was found. I know that they did alert her parents and let them know, like, hey, we did find her, but they told the parents, Dave and Mary, not to say anything publicly, that they weren't going to announce that it was Skyler yet, to kind of protect the integrity of the case. And I know that must have been very odd for them. I know they only told a few select people, but I can't imagine having to keep that secret while they're working on making their arrest. February 10th, 2013 rolled around, and this would have been Skyler's 17th birthday. And on this day, Rachel tweeted out, "I hate the shit I think about at night," to which I say, good. In March of 2013, a press release was issued that informed the public that Skylar Neese's remains had been found. Why it took this long, I could never say. I mean, the first time when Rachel initially confessed and brought them to the location, it was in January, and then they found her shortly after that. But either way, it did take a while. And keep in mind, all of this time, Rachel's just out. Sheila's just out. They know, they got their confession, they know who did it, and these girls are just walking the streets, which is just so frustrating. But I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do to make a case. I understand that. After the press release was issued, identifying Skyler as being found and being killed, Sheila tweeted out the following: "Rest easy, Skyler. You'll always be my best friend. I miss you more than you could ever know." And this included photos of them together in the tweet. Rachel also tweeted, which was odd, and it said, and I quote, "Rest in peace, baby. Love and miss you more than anything. May you finally have justice." Which is just odd, because at this point she had already confessed. Police knew she did it. She knew that they knew, and I'm just like, ma'am, hello? 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 But neither of the girls would be free that much longer, because shortly after this release was made, the statement was made, they went in to make their arrest. So clearly they'd been keeping an eye on the girls, and they knew where they were, and they knew where Sheila was. So when they went to arrest her, she was actually eating at a Cracker Barrel with her mother. I believe it was just the two of them, and police waited outside for them to finish their meal for some reason. And when she came outside, she was arrested. Apparently she was more concerned with people seeing her and how she looked than the fact that she was arrested. She was like, I don't want them to see me in the back of this police car. And I think she asked for a hair tie, I read. I could be wrong on that one, but yeah. Rachel was taken into custody as well. I believe she had set up previously a date for her to surrender herself, and she did that. And she did take a plea deal where she would testify against Sheila at trial, and for that she was going to be charged with second-degree murder. Rachel's testimony was helpful in prosecuting Sheila, but it wasn't the only thing they needed, because police had actually gotten a search warrant, and in doing so, they searched the home, they searched the vehicles, and they found evidence that corroborated Rachel's story, such as Skylar's blood in Sheila's trunk. Rachel pled guilty without a trial, I believe, for second-degree murder, and she was given 30 years in prison, but she will be eligible for parole in just 10 years. Rachel's family did make a public apology on behalf of their daughter. They seem pretty crushed. I watched some footage of the trial, and when they show Rachel's parents, they do seem pretty devastated, which is sad that their daughter did this, and now they lose their child as well. Obviously not in the same way, but there's such a ripple effect when you do things like this. You're not just hurting one person, you're hurting just so many people. But anyway, Rachel also made an apology directly to the court and Skylar's parents as well, and I'm now going to read that to you. I am so sorry. I don't know if there is a proper way to make this apology, because there are not even words to describe the guilt and remorse that I feel each day for what I've done. The person who did that was not the real me, not the person that I am, not what I'm made of, not what I believe in. I don't think I ever thought this would actually happen. I became scared and caught up in something, and I didn't know what to do. I never realized the gravity of my actions and how many people I've hurt. I hurt the Neese family and those who love Skylar. I hurt my parents and shamed my family. I hurt my extended family and all my friends who loved me. I hurt my teacher and those who believed in me. I hurt my church family, my community, and those who trusted me. And I hurt my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. May God bring eternal peace to Skylar and the entire Neese family. Again, I am so sorry, and I pray each day for everyone involved, and I pray each day for forgiveness. Now, during that statement, the part where Rachel says that she never understood the gravity of her actions, whoever's filming the trial actually is watching Dave and Mary, and at that point, Mary literally is like, and like looks to her husband, but he's just trying to keep it together. You can tell he's like hard. He just looks like he's so close to exploding, like he can't deal with it, and he's just staring straight ahead. But she's like, "Are you fucking kidding me? You didn't understand the gravity of murdering my child?" Like she just seems as you can imagine. You can find all of this online. You can see a lot of the trial online if you search it on YouTube. And her father was not receptive to the apology, and he did respond to her apology saying, and I quote, "Skylar would not be where she was if it wasn't for Rachel Schuff. You said yourself, Your Honor, this was first-degree murder. She should not get any leniency, and she can take her apologies and everything else and just sit on them, because that's about what they're worth to me and my wife. She has done nothing but made our lives a living hell since day one. She did cooperate in the end because she knew it was closing in on her, and yes, she would be caught. That's the only reason she feels remorse." To which I say, yeah, probably. Sheila was next, and initially she was planning on pleading not guilty to the charges, which meant there would have been a trial. But right before that trial was set to begin, she changed her plea to guilty to first-degree murder, but with mercy. Sheila was given 15 years to life for her part in the murder, and Skylar's family has said that somebody will be there at every one of her parole hearings to ensure that she never gets out. Sheila didn't show any remorse at trial, whereas Rachel did. Rachel was pretty crying a lot. I'm not saying one's more guilty or not, but one was seemingly more affected by what they did. Sheila didn't show any remorse, and she never apologized to the Neeses. Where Sheila seemed to lack any sort of emotional response to what happened to Skylar at her hands, her parents, Skylar's parents, are overcome with it, and they have like kept their home as a shrine to her. Not like a shrine, but there's photos of her everywhere, drawings she did, collages, like little blankets with her picture on them, and in the center of the room they actually have a big framed portrait of Skylar, and they had actually turned that into her urn. So after she was cremated, her ashes were all put in the back of that. Well, not all of them. Both Dave and Mary keep a bit of Skylar's ashes on them at all the times. Dave keeps his in a thick cross that he wears across around his neck, and Mary keeps hers in a heart-shaped locket. I guess I can't imagine losing your kid like that, your only child, and to lose him like that, like how that would affect you. I guess they've left her room pretty much exactly how it was when she left, and I guess it's all covered in purple because purple was Skylar's favorite color. The place where Skylar died, where she was murdered, has been memorialized with butterflies and balloons and flowers, and there's a wooden bench sitting there with a sign that states, "In loving memory of Skylar A. Neese, 1996 to 2012. As a sort of silver lining in this case, and sometimes we get those at the end of these absolutely horrible stories, Skylar's parents were able to pass Skylar's Law in West Virginia, and it was signed into law in 2017. Essentially what this does is it makes it so that missing kids, missing children who don't necessarily fit all of the criteria of an Amber Alert will still have an alert sent out for them, even if it can't be determined that the child was abducted. And though this law would not have helped Skylar because they didn't have the description of the car till the next day, and at that point she was already gone, this does help other parents so that when their child is gone, they don't feel as hopeless and directionless as Skylar's parents did. And that, my friends, is the story of the murder of Skylar Neese. Now I'll give you a moment to kind of let that sit in. Isn't that just so messed up? It's such an upsetting case. Like, what the hell, dude? Who does something like that? Who literally murders their friend? And for what? Because you didn't like her? Because she annoyed you? It just makes me insane, because at this point, they were already growing apart. Skylar could already tell that there was a wedge like developing, so why not just let nature take its course? Why not you just let yourself grow apart from your friends? Everyone goes down their own path, makes new friends, finds their new cliques, and is as happy as possible, and everyone just minds their own business. Instead, you plan to murder her for a year. To take this couple's only child and then go to their house and cry in her bed, Sheila, and try to get sympathy from these grieving parents when you killed their daughter? Like, get fucked, dude. What a horrible person. Sheila's a horrible person. They're both horrible people, but as I've said, there's just a special kind of evil that can do something like that. I am very curious as to what you think the motive was here, because I don't really buy that they just didn't like her. And there's a lot of information out there about the girl's mental health, specifically where Sheila's involved. A lot of people believe that she is a psychopath. I'm not going to get too far into that because I know that her mental health was evaluated and that it's been kept confidential because she's a minor. And I am in no way, I'm not a doctor, so I can't really comment on that. But there is a lot of information on that online if you want to look it up and see the traits of a psychopath, the traits of Sheila, the way she acted versus that. It's just not something I want to get into, but it is something that's often discussed. But even if she is, right? Let's say she's a psychopath. Being a psychopath doesn't make you murder people. There's psychopaths all over the world. A lot of the leading people in business, people who do very well, are psychopaths that don't murder people. So that's not really an excuse, Sheila, if you are a psychopath. And then I think about the other motive where they killed her to keep her quiet about their relationship. But this doesn't really work for me either for a couple of reasons. One, Skylar was known as being an advocate for gay rights. Like, that wasn't her thing. She's not the type of person who would shame somebody and use that against them for any reason because she didn't see a problem with it. Though, hooking up with your friends in the room is rude as hell, fucking teenagers. And two, is this happened in 2011. So they waited an entire year to go through with the murder. So the sense of urgency in keeping her quiet wasn't really there, was it? I don't know, man. It's just so fucked up. And I feel so bad for Skylar's parents to have to not only have lost your daughter to a violent crime, to lose your child, period, your only child, and then to have it be this way. And to know that you had the people who killed your kid in your house for years growing up, and that you like passed out flyers with one of them and were comforting one of them when they were sad, and just, I can't imagine what that's like. And to know what your child's final moments were like everything that I've told you, they know. They have to know that. And that's just so much for anyone to deal with. I can't even imagine it. And the fact that these girls could be paroled so soon, I hope they're not. Just because they could be let out and they'd still be in like their 30s. And I can't imagine what that would be like for Skylar's parents. But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and that it gave you every bit of information you would want when looking into this case. Shannon, I hope this was everything that you wanted from me. And of course, I just want to thank you all for remembering Skylar with me today, because what happened to her is just so horrible. She seemed like such a like a good person, a caring person, a responsible person, a happy person who just loved her friends and could feel herself slipping away from somebody that she had loved and admired and been close with for years. And they gaslit her and they murdered her. And that's just so tough. And I can't even imagine how horrible her final moments were. Not just in pain physically, but knowing that this person that you trusted for years and that you loved so much was literally responsible for ending your life. That's just too much to think about when you really start to like put yourself in that position. Please don't forget to let me know of any cases you'd like to see me cover down below. As this case indicates, if you keep saying it to me, eventually I will cover it. I have a long list, but every time you leave a suggestion, I put it on the list with your name next to it to give you a shout out, because I know you're filled with good taste and good ideas. Otherwise you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell, because I put out a new video every single week and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, I've got all my social media listed down below. I've got an Instagram, a Twitter, a Facebook page, and a Facebook group, and they're all down there for your convenience, along with all the makeup I use, the earrings, the nail polish, anything you may want, it's there for you specifically. And of course, I want to say one more thank you to Dossier for wanting to work with me again. I think it's really dope. It's very cool to be acknowledged for your hard work, because this is like my favorite thing in the world to do, and I'd like to continue doing it. And this just makes me feel very validated. And of course, thank you to you guys for always being so fucking tight, because you are all the literal best. The Brat Pack is the best group of people. I know everybody says that, but they're all wrong and I'm right, so. Okay, now, with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, at the very least. Be better than Sheila and Rachel, and I hope to see you in my next video.